Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning in to one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, theater, and entertainment. And I'm so excited to be talking today all about the fantastic new Amazon Prime series, Tell Me Your Secrets. We have the wonderful Harriet Warner, who is the creator of the show, Lily Rabe, who plays Emma and Karen, Bruna Papandrea, who is the executive producer, and Casey Haver, who's also an executive producer on the show. And Harriet, I wanted to dive in and start by talking a lot about the themes and the tone of the show when you were putting together the idea and conceptualizing it and writing the scripts, because you've really created this beautiful piece with all these strands that talk about what it is to deal with grief and trauma in a very kind of open-ended way, and these characters coping with it in completely different ways. So as you were developing these main characters within these two women, how did you think about the different ways in which you wanted them to each process their own grief and trauma so you could explore such different sides of this as a theme?
That's a really great question. I think just to talk about like how the show came to me kind of in a way is that exact question. I think I was really fascinated, and I always have been, as just someone in terms of things that they are interested in, is sort of reinvention. And this, particularly as someone who has explored quite a lot of ways to be better and to push myself to be the best version of myself in a way in terms of things I have explored. I was interested in that thing now that is available to all of us, which is you can be someone new, you can change. And the idea of that was my kind of, I suppose, my deep question for the show or for this story. And I was very interested in these kind of extraordinary stories that have happened in sort of, I'm thinking kind of English, cultural landscape in terms of crime. So, but it obviously, I'm fascinated with, obviously we hear about these extraordinary ones, but in cases where there was a, say a male killer who had a female girlfriend, I was so interested that we, seemed as a society to almost judge the person who has really committed no crime other than to fall in love with someone very dark and dangerous, to judge them so much more harshly. And I remember one particular case in the UK that was extraordinary with a sort of a couple, and there was the man had done this awful thing. His partner had given him an alibi at one point, which was proved to not be true. Her motives for doing that, I think you don't have to go too far down the line when you love someone of thinking, okay, maybe, that's not quite right, but yeah, I'm there. I love this person. I believe them. And I was really interested in this idea of, can we have true intimacy without true knowledge of someone? And do we fall in love with, do we have some superb instinct that we really know who we love? Or do we fall for the version that, any of us give to the world? Like, it just interests me. We're in a time when we can kind of curate our lives and reinvent ourselves in social media, and just sort of that as a theme. I thought, wow, I really want to write something original, because I'd written on other shows to earn my living, etc., but I was always so passionate about being the creator and the author of a very meaningful story, or my work really, and just finding that outlet, which I got through Bruna and Casey. And just to say that, to be recognized is wonderful. But I was interested in all that territory, and I thought, wow, so what about a woman trying to start again, who has fallen in love with someone very dangerous, the wrong person, who has kind of been guilty by association with that person, and has made one mistake, to give a false alibi, to say, yeah, you were here when actually you were there. And actually that's the thread that kind of brings the dangerous person to justice, but she's never free of it. And what fascinated me was a couple of sort of instances where that female partner, the kind of far less guilty, if guilty at all, certainly not guilty of the what I'd call simplistically the bad crimes, is out from a relatively short jail sentence, but is never free. She must live in witness protection for her own safety. And I thought, wow, that's such a heightened version of falling in love with the wrong person in a way, and how we judge women who fall short of kind of the kind of relatively narrow ideals that we set for women, and always we have, I think, suffered under them. You go back to the witch trials, etc. I mean, it's big stuff, and I think obviously huge change is being made, and I think this show is really part of making, you know, flawed, interesting, provocative women kind of center stage. So I saw the character of Karen Emma, you know, which Lily has, I mean, it stays in the mind forever what you did, Lily, with Emma. And I saw that character and I thought, okay, who is the opposite of that character? And it's a mother who has lost her daughter, who is huge grief, huge absence because of that, and fills that, you know, enormous void inside with the desire for revenge. And I think that's like, you know, any mother beyond sort of, you know, even the maternal role, anyone who has lost someone cannot have closure on that, wants either to blame something, you know, medical negligence, to blame an accident, or to blame the person you feel is responsible. And when that character is obviously Mary, the mother, the sort of, you know, opposite power from Lily, these two extraordinary kind of damaged warriors, when every route seems shut for justice or closure or knowledge of what happens to her daughter, all she wants is Karen Miller. And obviously Karen Miller is now somebody new. And how do I ever find this person? She's gone. I mean, think of America, this enormous landscape, like to find anyone in it if sort of, you know, your kind of all routes to that person are closed. And that's obviously the brilliance and point of witness protection. But I think to then put that kind of dark wolf, the conduit that will bring these two extraordinary women to the collision that we anticipate, certainly from, you know, the first episode, we want these two women to, they are our titans. We want them to find each other. But I think that sort of theme of obsession that these, particularly for Mary, it is her life is, everything is poured into this woman, her sort of, you know, the bête noire of her sort of subconscious. And in a way, I think the question is fascinating, is what will she do if ever that monster is caught, because it becomes the thing that drives her. And with Emma, her drive is to find peace, to find safety. And I think if you have those two hugely different needs, peace, safety, to hide, to just be small again, I don't want to find trouble, I want to live a quiet life, and someone who wants to drag you out of that and bring you to justice, it's kind of, it's the show. And that was there from the beginning. To think of Emma was to think of Mary, to think of Mary was to think of the dark creature that would find Emma. And Emma for me was always, you know, the monster out of Frankenstein, in a way destined to be alone. And I think that's a huge story of grief in itself. So, you know, that was kind of the drivers for it, really, in terms of the story.
And off the back of what Harriet was just describing with the emotional complexity with this character, Lily, I wanted to talk about your process and your journey and really taking these scripts and deconstructing who this woman was, because there's such a vast emotional landscape that you cover through your performance with this in so many different spaces. And even jumping into the fact that we have moments throughout the entire series and all of the episodes where we're jumping back to who she was at the beginning and where that's led her to. So you almost, to a degree, are constructing these two very different characters that are interlaced and interwoven throughout the series. So what were the unique challenges of really deconstructing and building out that emotional complexity in her?
I think, you know, it really, in so many ways, it was like playing two different characters, and yet they have the same soul. So it was like finding these two, you know, getting to sort of, and physically they were so different, and really these two sides of the same coin, but like carrying the same soul through them. And I think, you know, something that I love so much about the way Harriet writes and about the things that Bruna and Casey produce over and over and over again are that they aren't, you know, I've played women where there are conversations where you get on the phone, you know, with producers who aren't women like this, and they're saying like, well, we're just worried that, you know, she has to stay likable. She has to stay likable. And, you know, we're worried that her ponytail's a little bit tight. It might make her seem dangerous. And I just like, God help me. I don't ever want to have another conversation like that. I don't want to play women where the conversation sort of around them is fear-based. And so that was what was so the most wonderful part about playing this woman, is that I was doing it in a place where the creator and the creatives were interested in the same things that I was interested in as an actress, and that no one was going to shy away from those. And if we spend lengths of time not feeling great about this person, that's fine, because it's really, you know, I don't think it's our job is to tell stories, not to make people like us. And so I loved getting to do that with both of them.
And to that point, I wanted to talk to you, Casey and Bruna, about your journey as producers on this show, because so much of what you're doing is really, you're there to support Harriet's creative vision, and every single project has different things that it needs and wants from you as producers. And even to Lily's point about, you know, holding the energy that she needed and holding the space that she needed for her character as well. So what were the unique aspects of supporting that vision for Harriet, for Lily, and the rest of the team involved in this project that were a little bit different to some of the other projects you've worked on together?
I was going to say, it's always the same. I mean, it is always, Lily put it so brilliantly, the ponytail. I was like, I'm going to totally use that. I think particularly with this specific project, but it is not unlike other things that Casey and I tackle, is how do you preserve that darkness, the authenticity? Because I'm telling you, at every step of the way, whether it's a network executive or someone else, they're going to give you the notes that Lily just said, even with a piece like this. So it's our job to inherently protect that vision. That's what we, Casey and I, want to put into the world is, you know, I mean, like Lily said, it's not our job to make someone like him. I do think it's our job to make people understand the complexities and where that comes from. And I think that's really important. But that doesn't mean it's our job to make women likable, you know. And unfortunately for us, that is often the challenge, is protecting that, you know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times Casey and I laugh. We have the conversation where like, oh, well, she can't have an affair, because I mean, it's different if a guy has an affair, but like if she has an affair, you're just not going to like her. I'm like, okay. You know, if she does this, you're just not going to like it. It's okay. And so one of the things we realized is we started to put complex female material out there. I mean, Casey and I talk about this time, say, oh, actually, it is what people want. And actually, women want to see the kind of more complex, darker sides of themselves represented. And obviously, this piece had so much of that. I personally, and I know it's a subject that Casey and I are both very interested in, I'm fascinated to Harriet's point about identity, and can you escape who you really are? Can you change yourself? I've moved countries many times. You always try and hide those parts of yourself you don't like. Can you really do that? Ultimately, I think the answer is probably no. You know, that your nature is inherent to who you are. I'm very interested in exploring those things. And I think not just with the women, I think you see that with Hamish's character, which is why it's essential that someone like Hamish plays that role to bring such enormous vulnerability and complexity to it. It's why it's important Enrique plays the role of Pete. Again, everyone's dealing with their own secrets and their own complexities. And so it's our job to protect that. That is essentially, and to bring the best collaborators together to, you know, make Harriet's show as, you know, as beautiful and cinematic as possible. That's always, I think, my job. Casey, I don't know if you have more to add, but yeah, that's.
I mean, you pretty much said it, but also just, I feel the weight of Harriet's not only brilliant writing, but just the passion and love that she has for this. Like you just have to deliver the best, because you can see for how important it is. And it's not just, you know, another show out there. And yeah, you just really want to give it everything and give it all the support and, you know, and love that you can. So it was a special one.
And to add to that, Mara, in terms of having people who have your back, and when you are in a battle, as everything, you know, you're going to have so many of those along the way, whether it's money or, you know, kind of a view. These two women here, I will find myself crying in a minute. You couldn't have people who would have your back more and will go to war for you. And that's if I was saying to anyone as a writer, who do you work with? And obviously I hope nobody else works with Casey and Bruna. I just want it to be me forever.
Well, Lily's allowed to work with us as much as she wants.
Of course. But what I would say is, this is what you need. You need people who can always protect you, who have the same vision and more, and will bring all those elements that you couldn't have even thought of, as Bruna talks about cinematography and collaborators. I mean, in terms of taste, both Casey and Bruna, it doesn't get better. But in terms of, okay, this is the hill you're going to die on. And I remember one conversation at sort of very late stage, and I really needed, you know, Bruna and Casey, and they was sort of, I was in LA, Casey was in a swamp somewhere, Bruna was in London at a very kind of important dinner, stood outside in the rain in a London street, and and I will never forget it, because having these warriors on my side is why we have the show we have. And therefore I would say to anyone, you have to work with people who, when everything changes, and it's not about hand holding and just being, oh, how are you doing? It's, you know, there is emotional comfort as well, but it is about, no, this, okay, now we're in Dien Bien Phu and we're getting out of the valley, you know. And that is what Bruna time and time again, and Casey time and time again, and in every type of way, from, you know, the endurance of being down in Louisiana to the realities of making a challenging show. And as producers, you could not ask for more.
And Lily, one of the other threads that I was really fascinated about in terms of the performance that you bring is the fact that there's so many details that we uncover with this character as we go further, and in really huge pieces of information that really determine so much of who she is. So how did you figure out the way that you wanted to thread that into your performance and really capture that complexity that it required, but at the same time thinking about how much you wanted to give over to the audience and how much you wanted to let them into knowing those details when the reveal hasn't happened and isn't going to happen for several episodes yet?
I think that you know, so much of Harriet's writing and so much of what this show has built into it is restraint. There is, it's such a wonderful quality. I love it so much as a viewer too, when I watch shows where I am treated with respect as an audience member, that I'm not being spoon-fed things, that I am allowed to sit in my own discomfort. and with my own questions, and and not knowing can be so challenging, but it's also so rewarding. And I think that the space between the lines, literally and sort of metaphorically, in the playing of the parts, was like such a that was sort of my way in, because I think there are so many parts of her that she has either lost or doesn't actually know. So I had to sort of relearn them. I think she's sort of like a foal, like she's learning how to walk as this new person. So it felt very organic to withhold, if that makes sense. To, it wasn't, it was like the tracks were built for that. The blueprint was built for that, in the playing of the character, where I didn't feel like I was fighting the script, or fighting the tone in terms of having to withhold so much. Yeah, it was very unique in that way. But it's just great when it's all cohesive.
Yeah. And then, Harriet, I wanted to talk a little bit about Hamish Linklater's character, Joe. And, if any of the rest of you have anything to add along the way, please feel free to jump in as well, because it's so incredible the way that you've constructed this character, that very often we see that type of character in a show or in a movie, and there are a certain idea of what we think someone like that would be like, but you really capture all these different essences. We see him being incredibly charming. We see him completely unhinged later on in the series, when he's feeling very emotionally afraid. We see the way that he has the ability to really just manipulate people, which obviously with his past is a huge part of his central persona. So what were the unique challenges in really just thinking about all the different facets that character needed to include, and then working with Hamish on pulling that out in his performance?
Well, I just say, Mara, I mean, first of all, I remember Bruna, Casey and me being on a call with Hamish, because we were in love, we knew we had found our people, but separately, and we didn't know. I mean, I certainly didn't. I hope you don't mind me saying this, Lily, that you and Hamish are together, and it was the strangest thing. But when we spoke to Hamish, and it was the first time I'd ever spoken to him, it was wow. I remember everything in terms of all the times, my first connections, Lily, when we sat and had our mimosas in that restaurant, and everything. But hearing Hamish, that voice, oh my God, it was like hearing John before we had even gone down that road. But I think in terms of, and so therefore his performance is extraordinary, and he understood obviously all those subtleties that you speak of, and drew them out in a very physical way, as well as just a huge depth to everything. But I was fascinated with the idea of someone who, has had a period of time to reflect and has done these terrible acts out of a very sort of dark compulsion, and coming from a place of someone with very little power, but ultimately a huge sort of grandiose vision of themselves, and an ego that can never ever be achieved with the tools at this man's disposal. He's he's the guy that he's the armchair adventurer, to put into the world, and he will never have that adventure. And so I think that sort of, that dark vision comes so much from all the things he doesn't have. But obviously, to as a feminist, to find that your serial predator is so engaging is fascinating. And I think you allow that character, the characters will do what the characters are driven to do and desire to do. It isn't, you're not structuring that in a way to think, okay, let me create this guy who's really disturbing and and then he won't be, and then he will be. It's like, no, John Tyler came fully formed. And I think what's really fascinating is, for so much of the show, we follow the narrative John gives us, as we do really with all our characters. And I think that's a real kind of distinctly intriguing part of this show, because it again is a real question, you know, are we who we are, or who we want people to think we are, and that whole thing of, can we change? But I love the idea that, well, what we do with John, or how we connect to him, is we're following his narrative. And I think we're very invested in his desire for change. And, you know, yes, he's done these awful things, which, you know, we're not kind of privy to really at the beginning. And therefore, I think as an audience, we react to John, and we connect to him differently to how we do with Emma, because we know what Emma is supposed to be. And it's a really interesting sort of challenge to our audience. Again, how do we judge women? How do we judge men? A man who, here we have a serial, well, a sort of sexual predator, and a woman whose crime was to love someone very dark. And I think therefore it's fascinating territory for, you know, a feminist female writer to explore. And I think what's really intriguing is, it is all about the narrative we're given versus the truth. And I think, as with all our characters in this show, you know, the reveal of information and our responses change and oscillate so hugely with each, you know, step of that journey, and dropping of the facade, and a little peek into nature, rather than sort of, you know, the shield and the sort of curated self. But I was always, as with all these characters, so passionately connected to them, because in the worst is humanity, and to find that vulnerability with all the characters, and particularly with John, because I think it is really interesting to explore a male character with, you know, again, we blanket, you know, that in a way that the female roles aren't complex, but in so many situations we don't explore that sort of damaged, fragmented and fractured masculinity. And I think it was a wonderful opportunity to explore that in John, and but to make him pushed on a path that will ultimately be very triggering to someone trying to cope with a dark and dangerous pathology, but desperately, you know, I guess suppressing it. And it, like anything, water's going to find its way out. So I think when you know that, or when you feel that about someone, the journey is, when are the levers going to break? And that was certainly, I was never sure, or if they would.
And, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier about some of the parallels that are interwoven between these two female characters in particular. And so Harriet and Lily, I was really curious about, when you were filming scenes, the way that you would think about the minutiae of the emotional roadmap, because, you know, there's moments where, Lily, for your character, you know, we see what it meant for her to be emotionally free and dancing in a scene in a flashback sequence. And then we see what that means in a different way with everything that she's still carrying, and she's trying to find that freedom for herself in the present day. You know, on the flip side, we see Amy Brenneman bring a performance where she's feeling great emotional loss, and then you're pulling that into your performance at all. So were the two of you thinking about the overall context of what the emotional landscape was in those moments with the minutia, or was it something where it was just already so woven into the script and into the character moments already, where you didn't really need to think about it in terms of a larger context?
Harriet, do you want to start?
Lily, I have a tiny thing to say, and that is literally what Lily did, and what there's no word in either stage direction or dialogue connected to Emma Karen that has not been through the hugely demanding, challenging prism that Lily sets herself and me as her writer. And you will never find someone with more integrity and protection of that character. And just one tiny thing, when Lily and I were down in New Orleans in your house just before the pilot. And weirdly, I think I was always so shy around you whenever we had seen each other. I didn't know how to talk about the work. And we sat together and I felt this extraordinary just goosebumps as that character, a really difficult, you know, strange character to grasp, pass from this script, and this person with such difficulty in talking about who that person was. And we had never really, apart from that first day, and we played music and we didn't talk so much about, in a way, the character, pass to Lily. And my God, as a friend, as a mother, as an artist, she is the guardian of everything she has pastoral care of. And you just took what I did and boom, knocked it somewhere so I couldn't even reach it. And I was a terrifying person to write for, because her standards are so hugely high. And yeah, there you go, Lily. And that's it. It's all what you did. It's amazing.
Thanks, Harriet. That's so lovely.
No, it's so true. That's
so lovely. I'm trying to, now I'm just sort of bathing in that and trying to go. I think that in terms of the sort of dance with Amy's character, it was like there was a sort of invisible umbilical cord between us, but we were both attached to Harriet's, the cord was attached to Harriet. She was tethering us to one another. So I think it, of course, you're sort of always deeply aware of everyone, and yet the course, this sort of course that these three characters were set on, and knowing that the collision would happen at the time that it was supposed to, I didn't feel overly aware of that. If that does that answer your question?
Yeah.
That we were really able to sort of walk down our paths alone, because there's so much isolation in the show. I felt so lonely during so much of it, even though there was such intimacy between us but it was a very lonely experience in a way that, you know, it had to be. And yeah, so and then like there, you know, and then it kind of, again, I never want to reveal too much, but it was really about walking alongside people, and then maybe our paths were going to cross, maybe they weren't, but really just trying to put one foot in front of the other for Emma.
Yeah, and it's really wonderful to hear the way that Harriet's talking about the way that you were so protective of this character and of this role. And it asks you to go to so many places. And even the fact that you're talking about it feeling like an isolating experience while filming, surrounded by people that you felt very intimately connected to. What did you find that you really needed from Harriet, you know, from the producers, from the directors that were coming into the series as you were figuring out the details, the rhythms, the emotional tones of all of these scenes with them, in order to find that in yourself from them that they were able to really provide and support you with?
I needed those people to be Harriet Warner and Bruna Papandrea and Casey Haver, and I couldn't be anyone else. It had to be them, and they just then had to be exactly who they are. And it's no accident that they're women, and that they are that there is a, you know, I think that's the point. And it was like this collective lens and this feeling about what we wanted to put forward and what we weren't afraid to put forward, and then just showing up. So I can't imagine having played that part or doing this show with, I mean, it's so, and you know, Harriet's, it's her soul. It's like Harriet, it's like her rib cage is open. And so her heart is, and so of course I was going to take care of Emma and of Karen, but but I also felt like we were all carrying Harriet's heart around. So
Thank you.
we had to be good at taking care of that. It's a very precious, delicate thing. And there were alligators around and, lightning strikes. And
Lily was in the water with. And I think, can I just say, there's one other collaborator who's not here, who was a crucial part of this. And just hearing you talk about particularly that relationship with Lily, who was our producing director, John Paulson, who, he's not a woman, but he's often the only man in a room full of women. And there's a reason for that, which is like, he's an incredible filmmaker, but he has enormous empathy. And I think he'd much rather be spending time, he has 2 daughters, he's married to a sensational woman. And I know both he and Harriet and he and Lily had a really, just a trust, like a strong emotional trust. And that is actually the kind of, the other ingredient to all of this, because you're dealing with such kind of a very, not just tough physically scenes to make, but like tough emotional, very complex. John is an ex-actor, and I think this is such an acted, there's not a performance in here that's not crucial. There's not an actor's, there's no small role in this show, and I stand by that. There's just not. And I think because of the fact that John had been an actor for such a long time, it really benefited this show enormously. That to me is like, he was like that other key thing that I think made all of this work.
I'm so glad
So
you put
true.
on the tip of my tongue, and I was like, wait a minute, I'll leave John, and then I'll text him later to apologize. But
well, he's just a big girl, let's be honest.
But he really, and he's someone I met and felt like I had known for I was like, oh, it's you, but we'd never met. But I had that feeling of having
I so agree.
For a long time.
He's such a special man, and I think I remember with John, particularly with the final episode, and just the nature of production, to be writing and then shooting, and that got very much sort of to the wire. And John, the things you like will never forget and always be grateful for. He was under such huge pressure. He was obviously our amazing producing director, but also he was shooting the final episode, and never once let me sense the pressure he was under. And I'm sure, Lily, the same for you. You never felt pressure. He always made you feel you had all the time in the world. And I think, Bruna, it's something you once said, what does a great producer do? Make you feel you have enough time and enough money and enough support. And they're very special people. It's no surprise that, John came to us through Bruna, because she knew he was exactly the right man for our show. And he really was. And it's a shame not to see his lovely little face more regularly.
And he has the most wickedly wonderful sense of humor.
He does.
And when you're shooting a show like this, you really just
So
all
true.
it would take was just a moment of eye contact. And
And finally, I just wanted to ask each of you, in kind of looking back and reflecting on the experience of making this series and the journey that you've all been through on this, with all that you've accomplished and achieved, what are you proudest of in the work that you did and what you got to be part of with this series? Maybe starting with you, Bruna.
Oh my God, there's so much. I mean, I fucking know, anyone who knows me, I love this show. I love this bunch of people. I'm really proud of the group. I'm really proud of my repeat relationship with Lily, because that's so important to continue these. You're not doing your job if people don't want to work with you again. It's really that simple. And so I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud that it's just coming into the world in exactly the right way. And, and as we wanted it, and so, yeah, that's kind of for me. I mean, but mostly I'm just proud of these relationships that, we've found, and the deep respect that we have for each other. That's me.
How about for you, Casey?
I mean, this was my first show that I ever actually got to make. So for that in and of itself was just a huge moment. It may have not been the first one to come out, as we've waited a little while, But to have such an amazing experience with such great material and such great people in such an amazing part of the world was, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah. And for you, Lily?
Gosh, exactly that. I think we all knew that we had something, that the specialness of the show and the unique quality of the show was something that I just think we all held in equal measure. So I feel so proud to be sort of delivering it now to people, and yes, just that the trust and respect that we all share for each other as people and for our work is really something to be proud of. And I agree with Bruna. I am such a, I think, you know, the repeat business, it's such a great part of what we do when you get to the point of having. So lucky to have that with these people.
And what about for you, Harriet?
So much the same. I think it's kind of these relationships that we have been together on this project a long time, and you know, we've it's been an amazing journey, and that we are all who we are, people of integrity who care deeply for each other, and that actually it's more important than anything. I'm so hugely proud of the show and everyone's work, and the sum of it was greater than the part or whatever that is. It was incredible, the work, but more than that, that if nothing, do you know what I mean? It's like the relationships transcend it. It's like we will care about each other forever, and you know, again, like hugely protective and territorial about everyone. This is an amazing group of people, and for a first sort of show in America, which coming from England and bringing my family and, you know, throwing everything in to have these guardians and warriors, I couldn't have had a better experience, because their integrity on all levels, it's very special, and I love them all.
Well, it's such a superb accomplishment. I admittedly was up till 5 a.m, completely
Wow.
transfixed by it. And I want to congratulate you on everything that you've accomplished with this series. And thank you so much for taking time out of your days today to connect with us from literally all across the world.
It was lovely to talk to you. Thank you.